Now, 80 years ago today, 19 Lancaster bombers took off from RAF Scapton in Lincolnshire on a secret mission that would strike at the very heart of Germany's World War II operations.
We are, of course, talking about the famous Dambusters raid. And today, a special flypast will mark the anniversary, as Danny Savage reports.
Later this evening, weather permitting, this Lancaster bomber will once again climb into the sky above Lincolnshire. 80 years to the night since 19 of these planes took off on the most famous RAF mission of World War II. An ambitious, dangerous and daring raid using bombs which bounced off water.
To be flying at night at 60 feet in mountainous terrain to drop an ingenious weapon that had never been used before. It's generally the stuff of legends, and I think the modern day Air Force can be as inspired now by what they did, albeit it was some 80 years ago.
The story was made into a film, 1950s special effects recreating the drama of the mission.
Nice work, Skipper!
The man who created the bouncing bomb used these very marbles to test the theory of skimming them off water.
He just thought to himself, what would be the engineer's way of stopping the war?
They belonged to Barnes Wallace's daughter, who was then about 10, but still recalls the night of the mission.
They had a great big square box that was a loudspeaker, and I got up on a chair and got behind the curtain and listened to it, and it said how the dams had been burst. He was appalled. 58 people, I think it was, were killed, English people, and then there were all the Germans. And he just felt it was more than he could stand.
617 Squadron practiced flying the raid at the Derwent Reservoir in Derbyshire. Over the past 2 decades, we filmed with some of the veterans. Les Monroe was one of the pilots.
Yeah, let's take a flight and let's have a look at your old training route. Come and take us.
I feel a great deal of pride in the fact that I took part in the dam raid itself and as a consequence trained on the Derwent water.
Johnny Johnson, here on the far left, was a bomb aimer who made his pilot fly round their target 10 times before being satisfied with the approach.
It meant to me to do it, not do it properly, was a waste of time.
Both have since died. This is the first anniversary without any surviving veteran from those who took off 80 years ago tonight. But the sound of the plane which carried them will once again resonate across the county they took off from this evening. Danny Savage, BBC News, Lincolnshire.
Still the most extraordinary story, isn't it? And we're joined now on Breakfast by the comedian and historian Al Murray. Good morning, Al. Thanks for joining us, because I know this is a story that you're captivated by, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It is the most incredible episode, and the bravery of the men, the ingenuity of the science that went into it, and of course the appalling cost on both sides is something that is I find endlessly fascinating. Actually,
you mentioned the cost. The cost was incredibly high, wasn't it? But how important were those raids in changing the direction of the war?
Well, that's the question that's the rub in all of this. The fact is that the dams were attacked because they had water that was needed for the German war effort for the steel industry in the Ruhr Valley, which was the target of British Bomber Command's efforts in the war, to try and stop the German war effort and stop the factories and all this sort of stuff. So the idea was that you attack the dams and you deprive cities of drinking water and of hydroelectric power and the water needed to make steel. And there's great debate about how effective this was. The fact is the Germans repaired the dams in a great big hurry, which suggests they thought they needed to get that done in a great hurry. But historians are like dogs with this particular bone and will chew it forever. And that's kind of the unanswerable in a strange way. What we do know is that 53 aircrew were killed, and then lots of at least 1,000 people who've been brought to Germany as slave labor were killed in the deluge that followed. So there was a very high butcher's bill for this.
Yeah, we're just seeing some of the footage there from the Dambusters film that we've all seen. Yes. But you've been out there to Germany to see the dams in real life, haven't you? How did that change your perspective of what happened?
Well, I went with I do this Second World War podcast called We Have Ways of Making You Talk, and we decided that because it's the 80th anniversary, and you know. It is a story people are fascinated in, that we should go and look at the dams ourselves. Me and the historian James Holland, who's written about the dams raid. So I get to go basically with a walking encyclopedia, stand in the place where the thing happened, and say, so where are they coming from? What's happening? Oh, they're over there, are they? And what's really, really amazing about it is they were flying at 60 feet, sort of lamppost height. They'd flown at 100 feet across the North Sea to avoid being detected to get to Germany. One of the planes flew so low, his bomb, the bouncing bomb, touched the sea and was wrenched off by the seawater, and the plane filled up with water. Luckily, he was able to get back to Scampton, back to the UK. But to stand in the place and see the danger and the difficulty of the flying that the men faced on the night of the dams raid actually made me. I've read about it a lot. I've seen the film. I'm of that age. To go there and see how difficult the flying was made me find the thing even more unbelievable in a way. I found it even harder to relate to, because you can read about it to your heart's content, but when you stand there and you see where they had to duck down by the castle to their left, the Schloss to the left, and then down onto the water and then fly straight and level, it basically seems impossible. So I came away bamboozled by it.
That's incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
And Al, of course, we all know you for your work in comedy. But actually, not everybody knows that you have quite a serious background in history. And tell us about that, and what is it about this particular era that you are so fascinated by?
Well, I'm fascinated by the Second World War because it's just within within touching distance. I mean, in your package there, you had the people who'd flown on the dams raid they've only started dying very, very recently. These people, the last of them. And the truth is, the world we live in was completely shaped, I think, by the events of the Second World War. Our culture, our geopolitics and everything is all the legacy of the history of the Second World War, and it involved everyone. The crews that flew in Bomber Command were from all over the world, from all over the Commonwealth, who came from everywhere, from what were called the Dominions and Empire. So you had Canadians and Australians. There's a lad who was an Australian tail gunner who was 33, who'd come from an Australian sheep town, a fellow called Williams, who'd come all the way from Australia and was lost on the dams raid and had fallen in love with a girl from Lincolnshire. And knowing that personal stuff makes it completely come alive. And also that there's big questions about, is this the right thing to do? Should you be doing a thing like this? Should you be attacking infrastructure? Which is, of course, a thing we're seeing in Ukraine, or have seen in Ukraine very recently. So I find it endlessly stimulating for that reason. And a long way from when I was a little boy and it was all a big adventure.
Yeah. And I'm fascinated to know from your trip out to Germany recently, how are the Germans remembering this episode?
Well, first of all, we took a plane and flew over the dams, and the aircraft couldn't fly at 60 feet. Thank goodness we weren't allowed to, so it wasn't that scary. But the pilot said no one in Germany knows about this. I thought, well, kind of fair enough. Then but at the Möhne Dam, there's a cafe, and they do sell the video or the DVD, incredibly, of the movie, and they sell a German book called The Möhne Catastrophe, which says what happened and the damage that was done by the raids. But there's a memorial at the Möhne Dam site that sort of says we mustn't forget that the civilians who were killed in this bombing, it's all very well remembering, and I'm loosely translating from my German here. People see the pilots as hero. We've got to remember the women and children and civilians who were killed by these events, and it's a sort of, the bombing campaign has always been controversial, and I think the interesting thing about the Dambusters raid is it kind of encapsulates the controversy in a way. that there's no doubt these men were incredibly brave and incredibly skilled, and great ingenuity went into it. But the cost has to be part of that balance, you know. And that's why I find it profoundly fascinating, to be honest.
Yeah, well, do you know, just a reminder what you were saying about history being touchable and how this story resonates. Yeah. As you're speaking, we've just had a message in from Emily, who says that her mum's cousin was the Dambuster pilot that you just mentioned, lost his bomb on the way out there, his plane filled with water, as you described. Emily says she's amazed that he's just been mentioned. It's just a reminder for all of us, isn't it, about all those connections? Yeah.
Yeah.
You were right.
And the sinews that hold the whole story together. And it was ordinary people who were doing this, you know, tossed into this extraordinary story by circumstance and politics. It's the most amazing thing. And I'm so glad she's watching and that she remembers too. That's fantastic.
Al, it is lovely to talk to you. Thanks so much for talking to us this morning.